We've been looking at these calls from some regional communities to reinstate the mandatory element of the cashless debit card. A trial of the program saw recipients of JobSeeker and some other welfare payments have a large portion of their payments quarantined onto the card, preventing the money from being spent on products like alcohol. That scheme was in place across 5 regions but was wound up in October, from which point recipients were allowed to opt in. Those were on the cashless debit card and chose not to continue are instead being moved to enhanced income management measures. That's despite anger from some regional communities who blame the removal of the card for a return of alcohol-related violence. Let's go live to Alan Suter. He was the Mayor of Ceduna for more than a decade. He oversaw the introduction of the cashless debit card and he's speaking up over his concerns about its removal. Alan, thanks for your time. You've been a long-time supporter of a cashless debit card approach. What's happened since it was made voluntary late last year?
Well, since it was made voluntary, of course, the people who need to be on the card are no longer on the card. And we're seeing growing numbers of rough sleepers. We're seeing children not turning up to school or turning up in a very unsettled state. Anecdotally, there are increased admissions to hospital because of violence relating to family violence or alcohol. All of the things that we would have told the government would probably happen had they bothered to consult with us before rushing in and canning the card.
What do you say to the federal government that has argued there's no evidence to say that the card worked in reducing alcohol abuse and the associated social problems from that?
Well, principally, there's no evidence because the various government departments are refusing to provide any statistics. If the statistics were available, the evidence would be well and truly there. And I challenge the government to ask the state government to provide statistics. The various agencies are refusing. They're hiding behind privacy. Well, bulk statistics aren't privacy. So I believe the proof would be there if the government would allow people to see it.
From what you've seen as a long-time resident and leader in that community, what's the view among those that were on the card, the leadership within those communities?
I'm not certain. The leadership isn't really free to speak out because of the various pressures from opponents of the card. But I do know that the general community is extremely concerned. Our biggest concern is that we will have further deaths on roads because of people sleeping rough and falling unconscious on public roads. We had 6 deaths, subject of a coronial inquest back in 2008. And we won't be at all surprised if we have more because of the level of intoxication that some of our visitors are showing.
We saw a crime wave in Alice Springs off the back of alcohol bans being lifted. Would you compare what you're seeing in your hometown in that area now to the same sort of social impact that became a national story in Alice Springs not that long ago?
Initially, that was the case. A big effort was made by local authorities and council and Aboriginal leaders to bring some of that under control, and they've been reasonably successful. The big harm is being done to families, particularly to children, and that is wrong and shouldn't be happening.
So what would you like to see now? Obviously, you would like to see the cashless debit card reinstated to ensure those families and those kids are fed and get to school. What needs to happen from the federal government immediately from your perspective?
Well, they need to come to Ceduna unannounced and talk to the general population rather than selected people who are opponents of the card. And I think they'd get a very clear message from our community. The card was seen to do a lot of very good things. That has stopped, and we're afraid that we'll have a catastrophe as a consequence.
Former Mayor of Ceduna, Alan Suter, will stay in touch. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks, Kieran.